Hey folks, Jeff Salzman here with Encore the Light, 10,000 Heroes podcast. And here we are, as we are every week, except next week, which is Thanksgiving, right? Encore, we do have next Thursday off.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Yeah. So anyway, we're here every Thursday otherwise, 10 Pacific, 11 Mountain, and we talk about the world as it is unfolding and try to bring an integral sensibility to that process. And so here we are, and Encore, what do we have to talk about today?
Right. Fantastic. So a friend of mine, a really good friend, Matt, who is the person that introduced me to your show many years ago, so the reason why we're here together in some way, sent me this article and was like, hey, would love to hear what you and Jeff have to say about this. And it's from a pretty well-known Republican political strategist, got his start working with George H.W. Bush in the 80s. And he's basically one of the originators of the Never Trump movement. His name is Rick Wilson. And this article is called Red Caesar and the Next Regime. And it's basically, this guy is freaking out about what's going to happen if Trump gets elected next year, and just goes through a whole line of reasons why we should all be freaking out. And, you know, just a little bit, one of them is revenge. Like, and basically everything he's saying, and kind of the meta message is, don't underestimate what's going to happen, because that's what you guys did last time. And what happened last time is exactly what these people had planned on doing. And so why were you so surprised? And they're already saying what they're planning on doing now, and it should freak you out. And so he's like, they've been talking about revenge, and they're going to try and get revenge on all these people that disagreed with them or all these policies. And he says how they're going to do it. They're going to basically fire tons of people from the government and have the people be replaced, not by traditional bureaucrats, but by people whose only loyalty is to Trump, rather than any kind of competency. They're, rather than worrying about laws, they're just going to break a bunch of laws and then have the courts try and catch up with them later. They're going to install all kinds of really radical legal frameworks and lawyers that are going to take years or decades to deal with, if ever. Mass deportations, you know, the immigration being the bête noire of the kind of Trump people. And then all these enemies of the state that they're going to deal with. And he goes on and on and on and on and on. And he's like, you know, it's really a passionate plea for, do not ignore this. Do not underestimate it. This is not just business as usual. One guy gets elected, another guy gets elected. He really sees it as like a fundamental threat to the continuity of our democracy. And before I give you the mic here, I just want to warn you, there's a little bit of a trap in here for you, Jeff, that I'm just trying to lay. I'm not going to tell you what it is. So, what do you think?
That perked me up. I was depressed. Glad we got a trap.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was just pondering this yesterday because, you know, I'm glad I have a worldview that accommodates magical thinking, because I've just been thinking, no way, Trump. You know, no. I mean, not that I don't think it could happen. Just with my head in the sand. Just I don't know if you've noticed the Daily Evolver. I don't talk about Trump much. You know.
Yeah.
But here we are. It's a year away. A year from now, we will be digesting the results of the next election.
Right. And I'm not, you know, personally, I don't have a proclivity or an interest in talking about Trump. I feel like he's one of those Greek heroes where every time you say his name, he gets stronger. And I don't really want to be part of that.
Me too.
But what I really think is important, and I'm glad Matt sent this to us, is that a lot of people are worried about this right now. And those people, I think, will benefit, especially when they're your regular listeners, of having your take on this.
Yeah, no, I think Integral helps a lot with what's happening in Trump. And so, yeah, let's go for it. So, boy, where do we start? Let me just lay out a couple sort of general integral principles that we can sort of help look at Trump through. We've done this before, but I'll lay it out again.
It's a great reminder. It's kind of like people talking about kindness. You can just never get too much of it. Like, let's have the principles. Yeah.
So the main principle is that we're living in a time when there are three major worldviews online, and we're talking about the U.S. There's a traditional worldview, the God and country people. There's the secular worldview, the modern worldview, keep the trains running on time, not religious, sort of globalist in terms of, trade and all that sort. And then postmodern, which is globalist in a cultural way, multicultural and progressive and all of that good stuff. We talk about worldviews. They're actually world spaces. They're the space in which the world just is self-evidently presents itself to you. That in traditionalism, yes, there is a God. There is the America does mean this gratitude thing. But postmodern, America, there's more of a grievance story with America. So at any rate, so there's these three stages, and they're in contention. This is the culture war. Okay. Now, there's a stage before traditional that's we refer to as the warrior stage, the red stage, and this is the stage that we would call psychologically egocentric. Okay. And then it becomes ethnocentric, nation-centric, world-centric. Okay, in terms of what one is able to see and where one comes from and what one is taking into account. So what Trump represents is he has a red heart. He has that warrior fighter. That's his orientation. And he is the standard bearer for traditionalists who are like, 28, 30% of the population who feel like they're losing the battle. The world's becoming ever more secular, the world's becoming ever more multicultural, and that he is the Godzilla they need to go up against this juggernaut of globalism and multiculturalism. Now, from an integral perspective, we want to integrate the best of all stages. So we actually want, and this is a sort of a koan. It's like, what's the world look like where there's a healthy traditional, healthy sort of an enchantment about the world, the trains are running on time, and, a healthy orientation to bringing in people who've been left behind in the shadows, the victims of culture and history and karma. And what's that look like? So what we have with Trump is we have this red warrior, and the political expression of that is authoritarianism, and actually not authoritarianism in sort of a communist way where there's a Politburo and it's powers divided. It's more that king or even gang leader. There's a certain mafia quality where it is revenge, fear is that's the sort of number one currency of ruling.
Yeah, it's pre-bureaucratic. In a sense, it's almost like pre-hierarchical, in that it's like it doesn't have these like multi-level hierarchies. It's just my way or the highway.
Yeah.
And like you're close to me or you're far from me.
Yeah, and the hierarchy is who's close to me.
Yeah.
And who's the most loyal. And that can be a really, intense hierarchy. But yes, it's not a meritocracy in any way. It's loyalty. And that is Trump. And it's funny because in some ways, those of us who have a modern / postmodern sensibility thought that we had sort of left that behind in history.
And the whole point of the Constitution, and like at that moment of like Enlightenment thought and catalyzing or crystallizing those Enlightenment ideas into documents that run states, is to prevent that from happening.
Exactly.
Right? It's a very anti-aristocratic, anti-authoritarian. We're going to have some procedures in place that where you can't have this red style of government.
Exactly. The realization that brought in modernity and democracy was the realization at some point you realize we're not going to win. My tribe, my nation, my worldview, my God, we're not going to win. And so there's this new realization that we can divide and share power. And so we put it here, some here, some here. They check, they balance, whatever. And that is the essential. That's the gratitude idea of the American project. And that's the question is, will Trump be able to, will that hold with Trump and Trump 2.0? Because Trump 1, and this is the point Rick Wilson's making, is that Trump 2.0 is going to be far more virulent than Trump 1.0 because he has a lot more experience, the sort of MAGA mentality, even intellectual arguments and so forth. Talks about the Heritage Institute. I think last week we talked about the Claremont Institute, where they're playing around with real authoritarianism, like let's bring back the monarchy. And these are smart people. So he's saying, beware of what how Trump will stack the deck, because he will. There's no for Trump. There would be no internal guardrails, and I think that Rick Warren is right about that. His supporters, 50% of the people would vote for him, over 50% right now, the polls would say. I mean, could we just pause there?
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, that's from an evolutionary point of view, we really don't know what's going to happen. This next year is going to be a real rodeo. I'll tell you that. I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, and I don't know how to answer this question right now. But like the people I know, I live in this rural area where half the people voted for, it's the Dix County voted with Trump in 2016 and with Biden in 2020, both, very, very barely. And so I know a lot of people who voted for Trump as, like one guy at band practice one day, he was like, yeah, Trump, Hillary. I mean, I see them basically as equal. So I'm just going to pick randomly, or I'm going to let my daughter, who's illiterate, because she's a little kid, choose, because it doesn't matter, right? Like I think a lot of people, especially in 2016, were just like, I'm sick of the system. System isn't working for me, so why not try something different?
Right.
But now, like, I'm curious, 50% of people say they'd vote for Trump. Though it seems like, does that mean 50% of people are not attached to democracy in the way that you are? That doesn't, something about that doesn't seem right.
Well, I don't think so, and I think that's where the more extreme Trump is in his actual. This is Reading, by the way, and I think I got. I think the more extreme he becomes, the more pushback he'll get. That would be the system working. But a lot of people, and I can understand this. A lot of people, in terms of Trump's policies, they're good with them, and I am too with a lot of them, like no dumb wars, for instance. That kind of thing. And also, what people like you and I don't realize is the degree to which the modern and postmodern worldview have hegemony. There's really nothing else was really allowed to be talked about, or in the mass media and so forth, you really couldn't be. I mean, you could have your little subculture because it's a free country of Christians, but it wasn't really, you wouldn't find Christian heroes in movies. The Christians would be the bad guys. That was a switch as we moved into a postmodern aesthetic. We underestimate to the degree that we've won the culture war, and even won the sort of bureaucratic war, the sort of the big blob of a system, the establishment that pits us together. I watched a really interesting video a couple of days ago of ex-liberals and ex-conservatives, people who have changed from one to the other. These are young people. They're all in their, I'd say, early 20s, 30, whatever. And they get together, and there's a whole group of them, 10 or 12 of them. And they go through these various configurations of talking about and arguing about policy coming from people who have changed their mind. And it was interesting. And the one thing that they could all agree on, pretty much, there might have been one or two holdouts, but these were people at the extremes in all kinds of political ways, was that the system was pitting them against each other. And that they had more in common. There was a system at work that was victimizing them both. If we even think of the four turnings of the cultural evolution, there's a time at which the whole system becomes calcified and it's self-serving. So the people who work for it, they actually like polarization. It works very well for them. They get reelected. They raise a lot of money on it. They live, the most prosperous zip code in America is Washington, D.C. There's a lot of money there. So there is this feeling that people on you might say the 40-yard lines of both left and right agree on, that they're actually a lot more than that probably, that the system does need to be somehow confronted. Of course, modernity and postmodernity confront each other all the time. So you have modernity criticizing woke postmodernity, postmodernity's criticizing capitalist, materialist modernity. But then there's that attack or confrontation attack from the traditionalists. And then there's the sort of, Trump, who is willing and able to use red. That is fear, retribution, lies, whatever I say. He's Big Daddy. You and I've talked about this. The upside of red is he's fun. He's a character. He's interesting. Not for people who are physically repulsed by him like you and me, but for people who aren't. He's Big Daddy. People know Big Daddy. That's an old archetype. So he's willing to come in and bust the whole thing up. And in some ways, people are like, I don't know how it should go, but I do know that it needs to be busted up. And there's something there's a sort of animal intelligence to this.
And I can agree with that. I don't think this is necessarily working. I mean, a lot of elements of the capitalist system I don't think are working. I don't think it's really a meritocracy. I don't think people, like people in my town or people getting jobs these days are not going to be able to afford housing. There's a lot of problems, but I don't think that dismantling our democracy at the expense of immigrants and people of color is really going to help.
Yeah, well, I agree.
So it's interesting that I guess maybe another way of saying that is for the people that I guess to like, what do I have in common with someone who would vote for Trump because I'm unhappy with how the system is? It's like, yeah, I'm unhappy with how the system is. I have a sense that there's another way to go about it, improving it. Mm-hmm. And maybe for someone else, they're like, I don't see another clear pathway to improving it. So this is the best option I got.
Yeah, no, it's just, deconstruction is a stage in the path. Actually, you don't necessarily know what's next, but you know that this has got to be deconstructed. And there are ways in which, Trump was, he's a strange mix politically. I mean, he's for Social Security and increasing Social Security. That was completely against Republican orthodoxy at one time. If you remember, it's never remarked on, but it was like, wow. During his acceptance speech, he talked about how happy he was to have the LGBTQ people. And this was his nomination acceptance speech.
I don't remember that. No.
Yeah. And the audience was a little stunned, and he said, yes, LGBTQ or whatever he said. And he kept going. He doesn't really, I don't think that he's an old school racist. I mean, racist is one of those things that has three different definitions depending on the three different stages of development you're talking about. He's kind of an old school, guy, racist, if you will. From a postmodern perspective, he would be a racist. But he's not actively, I think, racist like there are people who really are. I don't think they get that vibe from him. And more and more Black people are supporting him. A lot of Black people like, his energy and his bust up the system kind of policies, as do Hispanics, more and more. And that's very confusing to liberals. But a lot of, particularly immigrants, they come in from traditional countries. They're traditional. They're not for they don't want their kids learning multi-gender. They don't actually particularly multicultural. They want to keep their subcultures. But they want to be American.
As we talked about a few weeks ago, like exactly. They weren't immigrating in some other place, they would not have any affiliation with multiculturalism. Yeah, which is kind of part of the beauty of Orange and modernity, that we get thrown into these situations that we wouldn't have chosen.
Yeah.
But what do you think of this article? Like, is he right? Should we all be like super freaked out? It's the end of our democracy?
No, I'm going to bet on modern consciousness. Okay, the container in which Trump is he's the bull in the china shop, but the china shop itself is modernity, and I think that modernity will outlast Trump. I think he's poisonous in the sense of a chemotherapy is poisonous. Not that his policies are moving the country in the direction of the 50s or anything like that is what we need, but Trump has brought up we have to create a culture where there's an integration of postmodern, modern, and traditional, and actually the earlier stages as well. That's the project. And we're not there. And so this is, I think, evolutionary movement, which is, as I often point out, not pretty. So I could see that, and I dearly hope he doesn't win. And I think we've learned plenty from Trump. But I don't know. I can't rule it out because human beings fight, and we have big. This is a big culture war. May yet be brewing. I mean, it is, but it could get a lot worse. So, do I think? So, I'm betting on modernity. I think that one of the reasons I'm betting on modernity is because people like Rick Wilson will sound the alarm from this one position that he holds.
But Trump has something to contribute to the dialogue. He's already contributed to that. He's already widened the aperture of political discourse. He's made allow people to say things they weren't able to say otherwise.
Yes.
Great, thank you. But what Rick Wilson's saying is really much stronger than that. In my reading of it, he's saying if this guy gets elected, we're hosed. Like it's going to take us
I'm
back.
glad he's so sure of himself. I'm not so sure. Every cabinet position has to be approved by the Senate. The military. Trump has some. I mean, he has a lot of power being the head of the executive, but it's not like you can all of a sudden say the high school is going to be governed by the 8-year-olds. I mean, it just doesn't work. At some point, there's the modern consciousness has a deep allergy ultimately to Big Daddy. And I think that it will survive. I could be wrong, but I'm here to.
Yeah, I mean, there's a distinction I want to make between modern consciousness and the U.S. government and the vehicle of state. So it's like, and I think this is what is important about this article is like, okay, I think we can agree modern consciousness is going to survive, but it's really going to be different. The outcome is going to be different in terms of our evolution as a country if this guy gets elected or not. And Rick is saying it's going to be a very big difference. And it's not like modern consciousness won't survive, but if whatever percentage of people vote for Trump, and it's going to have to be less than 50, right? Because of the way the electoral college works, it doesn't have to be.
It certainly can be
50, right? So maybe it ends up being 40%, but if they're in the right states,
it'd be 49 point something.
Okay.
It's there's not that much give, but yeah, and he could very well win the popular vote. Right now, it looks like he would.
Yeah. But the point is, it's not like everybody's consciousness would get set back, people that didn't vote for him. It's just that the institutions would not curate and push us forward anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like the argument around the Roe v. Wade. So all of a sudden, the right to abortion is no longer guaranteed by the federal government. It still is by many state governments. And then there's the really, like Louisiana and the really traditional center of gravity states want to set the clock back, as does Ohio. So Ohio has a big election, and it's decisively voted down. And abortion is put into the Constitution of the state of Ohio. And that's kind of what happens. It's like you move it one direction and then there's a backlash. And the good thing is that we get a country, and this may be, where the culture war leads us, where there are some pretty significant differences between how things are run in Louisiana versus California. And it was homogenized in a way before with the 50 states. Yeah. Now there's going to be a little more give. I think that's happening. The abortion thing is a perfect example. So that may be how things go. But, I don't know. I don't think that we're going to have any substantive authoritarian rule in this country. Where the president has a lot of power is internationally. And he actually understands other authoritarians. He doesn't really think democracy is necessarily better. And for certain countries at certain stages of development, it's not better, actually. A good authoritarian would be a better solution. So I don't know that that's not actually a sort of a reasonable insight in terms of moving forward. Are we really going to have to go to war to defend Taiwan? I mean, that kind of thing, I'm not so sure I'm not with Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure about that. I mean, I actually think, and I think of Putin and Ukraine, and, I'm in some ways, I'm glad I'm not in charge. I don't know. I'm evolution is a dangerous game, and I wouldn't want to make some of these choices, but I get them. I get where both. I could argue both sides. I'll tell you that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And how does are you going to vote
Oh,
next year? Yeah.
Yeah,
Are
you
you going to do
got
anything beyond voting in terms of participating in this electoral process?
probably. I'll donate probably or something, but I usually do. I don't get on the phone or anything like that. I do my podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
But yeah, I mean, I do think at some point, with all of the multiple perspectives that we can hold on all the arguments that we can make, we do have to ultimately make a binary choice. And it's either one guy or the other. And I'm not crazy about Biden either. I like him in many ways, but I think he's too old. Trump is too old too, but he's a cockroach. So they don't really age in the same way that the rest of us do.
Yeah, no, I'm interested because my understanding, like this evolution is not separate from us. It is the aggregate of what's going on inside of us, like in each of our our spiritual consciousness, but also our like day-to-day actions. And so as a evolutionary practitioner, what do you advocate, for people that are like, okay, I want to participate. I'm not a bystander here watching evolution happen. I'm participating in it. What yeah, what do you recommend?
Yeah, well, follow your heart. Do what arises in you to do, whether it's to talk to your friends or argue on Twitter or get in the campaign scene or protest, all of that good stuff. I think that's what we can do. Be a good citizen. It's something to be a citizen of a country that is democratic and at this stage of development. You really are responsible for keeping it going. So don't just fall asleep at the job. And yet, on the other hand, I will say that one of the great luxuries of modern culture is that politics can be optional. In earlier cultures, it's not. Politics is just right up against your door and right in your neighborhood. Here, you can opt out if you want. And I have a couple friends who are just like, my one friend, she's 80, and she's like, I can't bear it. I'm just doing head in the sand mode. So she's listening to books. She doesn't watch the news anymore. I think that's a legitimate choice too. When it comes time to vote, she'll vote for whoever isn't Trump. I think that's what I'd say about that. What do you think? Here's what I'd say not to do. Freak out. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. I did that for decades. And at this point, and we talked about this as sort of a cosmocentric view, looking from space at this planet and sort of trusting that we're going to muddle our way forward like we have. I mean, it's not going to be pretty. So that way I can love it instead of fear it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, what's dangerous about that approach is that it is a bias against action.
Yeah, well, fear is
I do trust that it's going to work out. Yeah, mainly because my sense of the self is quite large, and I think even if it doesn't work out for the humans, it can still work out. Like even to me, working out is not incompatible with us all dying. You know what I mean? Like life can continue. I believe in the dolphins. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I don't trust that, especially, I mean, for people, I mean, just think of, people who will be targeted, that what Rick Wilson is saying, it's not the same. They don't have the same luxury. And I might be one of those. I have no idea, but I don't think I would be. We don't all have equal luxury to disconnect. There's people who will immediately be deported, or there's people who will immediately be punished, or like Rick Wilson thinks he's on this list and he's immediately going to be thrown. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's not the same. It may not affect you personally or your 80-year-old friend or me, I hope, but it will affect a lot of people.
Yeah, no,
and so to me, I'm not like, oh, whatever happens, it'll be fine. We'll deal with it. It does seem really troubling. And at the same time, getting emotionally activated and freaked out, which is the tone of this article. and the tone of most public writing really is to get somebody to freak out about something, I don't think is
Yeah,
necessarily
that's my
helpful
reaction. Yeah,
in any way, right? But to me, it really encourages. I have this long-term path, and we've discussed it, of facilitating or bringing about more healing and more togetherness. And to me, it really encourages me to do that even more and like double down on that and have conversations with people and try and understand. Like here we are speculating about what people think that are not in this room. I could talk to them, and try and understand from a mediation, like a Ken Colloque perspective, like what are the deep interests that would leave someone to accept the possibility that the person they're voting for is going to burn everything down, and what are other ways that we can satisfy those interests.
yeah,
I think to me it's like an invitation for deeper understanding and deeper mediation.
yeah, yeah. Right on. I wouldn't argue with that a bit. There's one of the sort of principles of integral theory is that we move from first tier operating system is a fear operating system, this idea that something's wrong, we got to fix it, oh my God, to a love operating system where we see, okay, it's like an 8-year-old growing into a 9-year-old and growing up, and the humanity is doing that. And what it really needs more than scolding and punishment is love. And so we move from a fear operating system to a love operating system. At any given day, I'm operating from a fear operating system. And I get what you're saying, that fear is a very tried and true motivator. So yeah, you don't want to just be like, duh. But if you really can click in, and I think it's probably, both. I try to operate from a love operating system. I default to a fear operating system. But I do get the difference. And I think that, I think the challenge is to find how potent the love operating system can be in countering the fear operating system. And you talk about that, what you just talked about with, some of the sort of deep mediations and ways of getting under the surface and finding the connections that will satisfy people where they are, not make them who you are, but satisfy them where they are. That's good stuff. So
Yeah, I think about a conversation as a I don't know if weapon is the right metaphor, but a conversation as the conversation I want to have is something that could inoculate someone against all the fear mongering. Like all of this, like the anti-immigrant thing is great. It creates this whole like boogeyman. These people are like anti everything about your way of life. They're going to take your daughter, this whole thing. And like what experience could a person have in an hour that would then inoculate them for the rest of their lives against that kind of fear mongering? I think that's the thing I want to create, or like this othering or throwing people under the bus that happens with every political ideology that like liberals will have towards Trump people, or whatever. Like what kind of experience could that person have so that they just weren't capable of just saying those people anymore? That those are the kind of experiences I'm trying to create.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a big order. I think that, the challenge is actually because people who are ethnocentric, they're ethnocentric. They're not actually going to be, yes, they'll grow. Their kids will definitely grow. And their grandkids will be completely different. But
but we all have moments, like, or we have the possibility of having moments in our lives that pop us out to the next level. Like I wasn't born like this.
Totally.
Right? Like you had a moment at some point where you just exited.
Yeah. Right? I can think of every moment I moved through, every stage of development, actually. I mean, so I sort of pinpoint it,
let's talk about that next time.
Okay. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I like it too. But yeah, no, you and I come back to the same conversation. You've mentioned this, where it's how do we integrate people who don't see the world the way we do? And how do we live with them? And actually, we're doing pretty well in America, honestly. I mean, considering history, there's definitely more to go, and it won't be pretty. I always say that. Anyway, I'm sorry. I apologize. How about the trap? We got 3 minutes. Did you spring the trap, or did I miss it?
Well, here's the trap. The trap was that you would say, yeah, I mean, you kind of did it a little bit, but the trap is that you would say it's all going to be okay no matter what.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And evolution will take care of it. And so you did go there a little bit, but
Yeah.
mostly you did not.
What can I say? Oh, all right. Well, what the fuck with this Trump though, huh? Just when, I mean, after the last election, he was going to be in the rearview mirror, and nobody was going to be able to survive January 6th. Whereas people
Yeah.
went and blew out the windows of the rotunda of the Capitol building and waved Trump flags out of it. And he's back. I mean, the power of the authentic con man. You
Yeah.
know?
Or I might say the power of the wound. Like to me, the
Okay.
only way I can explain this is a homie did not have a great experience growing up. He has some sort of deep wound, and he's doing all these things to try and to heal and to meet whatever that unmet need is, and he has not figured it out. And if he gets elected, it will not help him, personally. Like I think it's more on the order of like a hug or EMDR or some there's something that he needs, but I don't think this election is really going to be of service to him.
Well, at least we can take some comfort in that.
No, I don't. I
Oh,
want his name to
I
be
don't
back.
want, no, we want Trump to grow, but I mean, that's a big order.
Yeah, no, but that's what's going to help all of us, right?
Yeah.
Like these
Right.
people, I think all these people, they're doing all this shit in the world. They have some need,
Yeah.
and because they can't get it, they're fucking with us.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Thanks,
All right,
Jack.
Encore. You have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. And thank you so much. It's just such a great privilege and honor to talk to you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm honored. I'm honored as well. Thank you.